Our first Less Wrong post is... Sorry. Our first Less Wrong post is protein reinforcement and DNA consequentialism, which is integrating a lot of things that we have read from previous posts and setting us up for the knockout post that we'll be talking about second after this. But since it is the setup, we have to go through the setup first. Let's start out with, it takes hundreds of generations for a simple beneficial mutation to promote itself to universality in a gene pool. Thousands of generations, or even millions, to create complex interdependent machinery. That is some slow learning there. And I believe we were just talking earlier about the attempts to exterminate deers to teach them not to jump in front of cars.
Yeah. We were wondering how long it would take for deer to evolve to not jump into the road,
or at least not to do their whole deer in the headlights.
I mean, a lot of times they just jump into the road. It's stupid.
I hit a deer on a motorcycle one time. It was terrifying.
Oh my god!
And there was a deer on a motorcycle?
Yeah, man. A lot of delinquent deer out there.
How did you do? How did the motorcycle do?
Fine. I was riding pillion, which is the fancy word for on the back.
Okay.
So the driver actually like turned and accelerated as the deer was coming toward us. So he hit the deer in its hindquarters. It did a flip over our heads, and I got like that bullet time where I saw I made eye contact with it. I was like, no. I was like, why? And then it ran away. I don't know if it was injured or not. Deer seem to sort of be bouncy in that way. Then again, like maybe they just run to go die elsewhere. But we looked and we couldn't find it. But it was incredibly terrifying.
And the motorcycle didn't go spilling out into the street, it sounds like.
Nope. The driver like accelerated at just the right time and hit the deer at just the right spot to flip it.
So is this like some master level motorcycling?
This is a instructor, so.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because my instinct would have been to like slam the brakes or something, but apparently he didn't.
No, I think that's what would have killed you.
Okay.
Because you wouldn't be able to decelerate fast enough, and then you would have hit it at slower speed, and it would have been a collision.
Instead of flipping it over you kind of thing. Neat.
But
yeah,
yeah.
Slow learning if you have to kill things off that are not the way you want it. When your reinforcement learning is murder, that takes a lot of bodies to get through. Eliezer points out that protein computers, also known as brains, and sensors can learn by looking, much faster than DNA can learn by mutation and selection. And yet, until very recently, the protein learning machines only learned in narrow, specific domains. Squirrel brains learned to find nut trees, but not to build gliders, as flying squirrel DNA is slowly learning to do. The protein computer learned faster than DNA, but much less generally.
I kind of wonder about the selection pressure that causes things to become flying, like, whatever's... Like, there are flying snakes, for example. They do the same thing. They go to the top of a tree, and then they flatten out and glide. But, like, flying squirrels figured that out. I think various forms of lizard, snake,
bats.
Whatever bats are properly flying, yeah. But, like...
Protobat.
But other snakes and squirrels didn't.
Let's just take a moment to appreciate that spiders can't fly.
Thank God.
Can't some?
They can actually...
They can jump.
They can, like, shove some web into the air, and if they're light enough, they can, like, glide around.
Oh, yeah, those little ones I don't mind. It's more just like I'm glad that I don't have to dodge, like, flying tarantulas.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I could burn the entire planet down.
Aren't tarantulas, like, not poisonous, though?
They're horrifying. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In any case...
They can throw their little leg hairs at you and sting. Like, they're like, you know, those obnoxious cacti where you get, like, the little hair-like bristles in you. It's not very much of a deterrent to a human, but it is annoying.
Being terrifying is a deterrent to me, so...
They're good at that.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting thing about all of this, the fact that all these animals have these incredibly refined, evolved behaviors is, like, humans apparently for hundreds of years of writing philosophy genuinely believe that we don't have any of these evolved behaviors.
Really?
Because they would write, well, I mean, like, they would write as though, like, we're the animal that reasons. And it's like, obviously that's bullshit. Like you just have to think about it for 2 seconds. But it seems like this was the mainline philosophy of, you know, like European philosophy.
People also used to think that there was, like, spontaneous generation. You know, like, grain creates mice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Dirty
we're not really good at being the animal that reasons.
No.
We get there eventually, I guess.
So Eliezer points out that the basic evolutionary idiom works through the actual real-world consequences, avoiding the difficulty of having a brain imagine them, because that is really computationally hard. Naturally, this also misses the efficiency of having a brain imagine consequences. It takes millions of years and billions of dead bodies to build complex machinery in this way. I do like his little pull-out quote there in parentheses, if you know how to program, you can verify for yourself that it's easier to build a nut tree mapper than an artificial general intelligence.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, seeing as we're still working on that second one.
Yeah.
But speaking about how brains are working, built by evolution, he points out that one idiom that brain-building DNA seems to have hit on over and over is reinforcement learning, repeating policies similar to policies previously rewarded. If a food contains lots of calories and doesn't make you sick, then eat more foods that have similar tastes. This doesn't require your brain to visualize the whole chain of digestive causality. I also like this because we've had you on for at least 2 GP2 episodes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that brain-building software seems to have hit on is reinforcement learning, where the same kind of thing happens. They just kind of try a bunch of stuff, and the ones that work get reinforced.
And evolutionary algorithms are... what do they call it when you use basically fake evolution to iterate over...
Genetic algorithms,
yeah,
right?
That's, I guess it is what it's called. So, kind of just copying nature.
Yeah.
Trying to do it a little faster than nature.
Yeah. That's a good point, though, because this was written in 2007.
Yeah.
And that was well before we had all of this more recent evidence that, like, yes, all you actually have to do to get really amazing performance that looks a lot like intelligence and might actually be intelligence is just make reinforcement learning algorithm bigger.
Yeah.
So that's... Eliezer didn't know that, but he was on the right track, I think.
It's kind of, I don't know, fantastic. I
Kind
guess we'll
of
see
scary.
how it how it plays out. Interesting that that's all it takes to eventually get to brains.
Mm-hmm.
It does say, continuing on here, that it seems much easier for evolution to hit on reinforcement learning than a brain that accurately visualizes the digestive system, let alone a brain that accurately visualizes the reproductive consequences n months later. So he asks, why not learn to like food based on reproductive success, so that you'll stop liking the taste of candy if it stops leading to reproductive fitness or reproductive success? Why don't birds wait and see which wing-flapping policies result in more eggs, not just more stability? And the answer is because it takes too long. Reinforcement learning still requires you to wait for the detected consequences before you learn.
Yeah, if you're just, hey, what if I just eat spinach and then see how my offspring turn out?
Right.
Whoops, they didn't survive. Let's try nuts. Yeah, like,
No.
that would be a really bad way to do things.
I do like this sort of, the reinforcement has to happen very quickly after the thing that is being reinforced, I guess, because it was...
Yeah, because you can't tell which, interventions are actually causing the results that you're seeing if you're doing a bunch, I don't know, if you're eating multiple foods, for example.
I mean, obviously it's how you train dogs. I don't know about cats, never tried to train one, but it has to be... Same way, yeah. It has to be the thing you're punishing or rewarding them for has to happen very close after the actual action. You can't, like, come and see that they got into the trash an hour ago and bring them over and yell at them. I mean, you kind of can.
You can, but they don't understand what's going on. They're just like, I'm being yelled at, and they're gesticulating at the trash can, and I don't know what's going on, but I feel sad.
Yeah, I guess the trash can is bad. Yeah.
I mean, maybe if that keeps them away from the trash can, but it's not quite the same thing. But I like how this was used as a hack where some people wanted to get themselves to do things like chores or productive work more, and one thing they would do is like give themselves a little M&M whenever they did the thing as a reinforcement thing, since human bodies like M&Ms. And I think, didn't this actually come up in HPMOR?
Yes,
Okay.
he gave Hermione a bag of chocolates to train her inner pigeon so that she wouldn't be like have a negative reaction towards seeing him.
Eliezer himself actually did that, where he had his wife and one other person feed him M&Ms when he like said something nice or did a good behavior.
Cool.
Which I don't know whether that chapter in HPMOR came first or that experiment, but I guess he liked it.
I read about the experiment after MLR, but I'm not sure, like temporally, which one came first.
Did it work?
With Eliezer?
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine that he liked it when he said smart things because he got M&Ms. I'm not sure if it made him say more smart things. Because that sounds hard to
I think it was
train
reinforcing
in.
nice behavior.
Oh, then maybe, yeah.
It almost, like, I want to say that it wouldn't work because you know what you're doing, right? But I guess it works on a more fundamental level. Yeah, I believe, God, who was it? Someone did the trigger action protocol thing, that whenever a thing wanted...
I think that was Brienne, if you're talking about
Brienne?
using the
The clicker?
Clicker, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And apparently, eventually got to the point where just doing the clicking motion and hearing the clicking sound was rewarding in itself because...
Yeah, I clicker train my pets, but it also totally works on humans. There's studies that show, you
even
learn
when
to
you're the
associate
one with
reward.
the clicker.
Yeah, like brains aren't that smart, actually.
Fucking brains.
So
man.
the way this works initially is you use the clicker. So like I sit down and actually do my fucking job rather than play on my phone. So I give myself an M&M and a click, and do that for a few weeks, and then take away the M&Ms, but I still like the clicks. Okay, I'll buy myself a clicker.
Yeah, for a while though, it'll attenuate eventually.
Yeah, and you have to reinforce it as well. Like, you have to, keep associating that with positivity and remembering to, like, negatively or positively reinforce whatever behavior every time you do it.
And you'll probably just get cavities after eating M&Ms all day, every day.
So maybe M&Ms aren't, like a long-term best way to do that.
Maybe if I'm trying to train myself to work, I can just, like, look at, like, how I'm not behind on my bills. Like, I'll look at, like, my monthly expenses and then do a click. Be like, perfect. All right. I like staying in the green. Okay. Yeah. I'll keep doing this.
I think the best life hack I have along these lines, which sort of comes from meditation, is actually just focus on the pleasurable aspects of what you're doing in the moment. And as a corollary, maybe don't focus on the fact that, like, oh, I have to do this. It sucks. Like
just reinforcing the UG field.
Yeah. Like, try to shut down the negative self-talk and then try to actually cultivate some sense of, like, I don't mind doing it. Like, this is, there's things about this that I can like and that I can focus on. And then that sort of trains you actually in a subtle way.
Apparently, this is also kind of a big thing with criminality theory, where for a long time, if you wanted to discourage something, but it was really hard to catch people, you just made the consequences worse and worse. We're like, if you're doing this thing that's very rare, but we catch you at it, we execute you. And that's supposed to be like, when people are thinking whether they do this thing or not, the fact that the consequences of being caught are so much worse outweigh the unlikeliness of being caught.
I think that didn't work, right?
Yeah. Apparently that just doesn't work very well. By far, the most effective thing for reducing criminality is catching people quickly and punishing them immediately after, even if it's just like a light punishment. Like just maybe a scolding or a weekend in a drunk tank or whatever. Just the consistent catching them soon after the fact is the important part.
It'd be hard to change society to work this way, but it'd be funny if, like, you get caught, like, I don't know, trying to rob a 7-Eleven, and the cop just, like, slaps you really hard in the face, and that's your punishment.
Yeah.
As long as you got caught 95% of the time.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it would work.
I think there are societies that basically work like that. Like, I think that's how hunter-gatherer sort of societies self-police.
It kind of argues for more not depending on police, since they can rarely be there in
that's what I was
time.
thinking.
And more,
citizens arrest or
right,
citizens, I guess, slapping you in the face.
Yeah.
Self-defense protocols.
Just a light caning whenever you find someone doing something you don't like.
That's why I keep that shotgun underneath my counter.
I mean, we talked about
loaded
Singapore
up only with the pellets, though.
a couple of episodes ago, and look at the crime rates in Singapore.
Uh-huh.
So, I don't know, not to, like, throw cold water on your excitement there, but maybe it's, I don't know.
Well, Singapore is unique in a lot of
It
ways.
is.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I also just wanted to point out, because it kept bugging me that a couple of times it mentions your brain doesn't have to visualize the whole chain of digestive causality, but before this we were literally just talking about how a bunch of your neurons are in your digestive system.
Right.
So that's not actually true.
Well, and also there's the fact,
entirely.
Well, they're not visualizing.
and have any of you ever had taste aversion, or just the phenomenon of, like, oh, I can't drink rum anymore after that one night?
Oh, yeah.
Like, so that's your body learning that's poison, and now it just makes you nauseous and disgusted anytime you think about eating it. And I've had the same thing with non-alcoholic things that gave me food poisoning, where, like, I can't eat that thing, and
it
that's
sucks when you accidentally, like, I don't know, if you get car sick right after you had pizza and then you just have an aversion to pizza, and it's like, no, I don't want to have an aversion to pizza. It's just, it wasn't causal.
But that's totally an evolved, I don't know, I don't think reflex is the right word, but adaptation to get us to not eat things that are bad. It's cool.
We are, at least the last few things I pulled out was when natural selection builds a digestible calorie sensor linked by reinforcement learning to taste, then the DNA itself embodies the implicit belief that calories lead to reproduction. So the brain doesn't have to have that causal chain because the DNA embodies it. Only short-term consequences, which the protein brains can quickly observe and easily learn from, get hooked up to protein learning. The DNA builds a protein computer that seeks calories. The protein computer learns which tastes are caloric. But the DNA had better hope that its protein computer never ends up in an environment where calories are bad for it. or where sexual pleasure stops correlating to reproduction. And it trails off, and there's a dun 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 sound before the next episode.
Wouldn't that be terrible if that happened?
It would, man.
Can you imagine?
I can't. I'd need some sort of fiction to help me imagine this sort of crazy scenario. All right, do we have anything else on this before?
No, we're leading up into popular post here.
Cool. Thou Art Godshatter, which is one of the ones that I remembered the final punchline of it, but I had forgotten how well stated and kind of poetic it was along the way. So this.
Didn't you do a reading of this one, Inash, when you were reading like LessWrong posts?
Yes, I did.
Because I remember hearing it in your voice. So
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm glad that I'm not just hallucinating that.
Yep, that was me. Thou Art Godshatter starts out with, we have no instinctive revulsion of condoms or oral sex. Our brains, those supreme reproductive organs, don't perform a check for reproductive efficacy before granting us sexual pleasure.
Thank God.
I know, right?
I like that we have the both ends of the spectrum here. Why aren't we consciously obsessed with inclusive genetic fitness? Anybody want to take a stab based on the previous thing we just read?
I expect that it would cause neuroticism and society to collapse.
Oh,
Just like in that short story that we were talking about before we started recording, where if we were smart enough to keep track of the implications of all of our actions,
We'd be paralyzed, right?
or we would just be psychopathically like favoring people who had our genes and basically at war with people who didn't, and just trying to fuck them over all the time.
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a drag. I really, I mean, that short story and this idea in general. I forget the name of the story. Didn't we?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask. I don't think I know that one.
Kin and kinship, I think.
I just
Kindness to kin.
Kindness to
kindness
kin.
to kin. Yeah, but it's really nice that we can feel warm, pro-social, brotherly feelings toward people who we barely know and have nothing to do with us. Like that's a fantastic thing about being human, right? And that's
We'll link to that one too.
part of Godshatter right there.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to keep as part of my neurology. We get we're getting to it, but if we ever get the ability to crack open our code and edit it,
Yeah.
I think most humans tend to like that about humanity, like that we're able to be empathetic towards other humans and even like pets or even abstract concepts like nature.
Mm-hmm.
But in the context of the last post, I'm guessing the reason that we aren't obsessed like this is because the consequences aren't immediate enough.
Yes. It is said that when the evolution fairy decides which genes to promote to universality, she doesn't seem to take into account anything except the number of copies a gene produces. So agents created like that would have sex, or hold on a sec.
Or do anything really.
Yeah. As you guys were just saying, agents who were only interested in reproduction would have sex only as a means of reproduction, wouldn't bother with sex that included birth control. They would eat food out of explicitly reasoned belief that food was necessary to reproduce, not because they liked the taste. Postmenopausal women would babysit grandchildren until they became sick enough to be a net drain on resources, and then would commit suicide. It just seems like
Men
such
would line up around the block at the sperm bank.
That's what I was thinking. Is like, wouldn't you just kind of jack off all day and so like donate all of the sperm to the sperm bank? Like, don't even bother with the whole having sex part. It's just so much work.
Yeah, right? So many calories you could be using to jack off more. Seems like such an obvious design improvement.
I just had this mental image of someone running into like the grocery store, like, I gotta eat all the kale. Have all the babies eat the kale.
Is kale good for sperm production or
I don't
something?
fucking know.
Oh, okay.
Just, like, yeah, they were like, yeah, if it was just like, who cares about taste, like eat the best foods to have the best babies, and just imagining like people rioting at a grocery store. Give me the oranges.
Drinking all the Powerade. You will have babies.
I don't know if Powerade is good for reproductive fitness, but maybe it gives you the energy.
It's good for It's good for sexual endurance. After that fifth or sixth time of the day, you need some electrolytes.
Right, yeah.
Rehydrate.
Yeah.
So DNA constructs protein brains with reward signals that have a long-distance correlation to reproductive fitness, but a short-distance correlation to organism behavior, which was what the last post was basically about. You don't have to figure out that eating sugary food in the fall will lead to digesting calories that can be stored fat to help you survive the winter so that you can mate in spring to produce offspring in summer. An apple simply tastes good, and your brain has to plot out how to get more apples off the tree. And so, when hominid brains capable of cross-domain consequentialism consequential reasoning began to show up, they reasoned consequentially about how to get the existing reinforcers. It was a relatively simple hack, vastly simpler than rebuilding an inclusive fitness maximizer from scratch. The protein brains plotted how to acquire calories and sex, without any explicit cognitive representation of inclusive fitness, quote unquote. So, yeah, basically we kept going after what we had been programmed to go after, because we had been programmed to go after the things that increased our reproductive fitness. Yes.
Or things that looked like it.
Yeah, even if that doesn't apply anymore in the modern environment. So Eliezer says that the blind idiot god is purely obsessed with inclusive genetic fitness. No quality is valued, not even survival, except insofar as it increases reproductive fitness. There's no point in an organism with steel skin if it ends up having 1% less reproductive capacity, which is fucking depressing as hell. But
There are other reasons that it's hard to evolve steel skin.
Well, yes, but if it didn't increase your reproductive fitness, it wouldn't happen. And yet, when the blind idiot god created protein computers, its monomaniacal focus on inclusive genetic fitness was not faithfully transmitted. We are as alien to evolution as our maker is alien to us. One pure utility function splintered into 1,000 shards of desire.
That's so poetic.
Yeah. The one pure utility function being have more grandkids, and the 1,000 shards of desire being things like get calories, eat that apple, eat
Or
an orange.
make art.
Or make art even, yeah.
Like, enjoy a sunset.
Right?
As the token kid haver on the podcast, I do think it is amazing how, yes, there are so many ways that we can have satisfaction that don't have to do with reproduction, and yet evolution still manages to give the average American like roughly a even reproduction rate of 2 offspring per person or whatever it is. I'm not expressing that correctly, but the point is, like, still the blind idiot god has found a way to manipulate us into doing that very successfully.
I mean, like, it makes us party in our 20s, and then, like, when I was at the Slate Star Codex meetup with a bunch of other, like, late 20, like, early 30-somethings, and there's one person there that had a little kid that was walking around being adorable, and we were all like, oh god, the baby fever's real.
Cool.
So...
And I also heard it is extremely satisfying. What is the term for life
Fulfilling,
satisfaction?
probably?
Fulfilling, yes. I don't know. Can you verify?
Yeah, I think it's great. And I always shill for having kids, and I think rationalists should have more kids. But like the thing is, I didn't know that before I had kids. It was literally just my programming, my Godshatter programming that led me into that, because I couldn't have known in advance if it was going to be great for a certainty.
So was it an actual desire to have kids?
Not really. No, it was.
You were just having sex and kids happened?
I mean, I think it was like, yeah, like, that's what you do.
Okay.
It was a cultural meme, I guess I'll say.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah. Well, cultures without that meme probably didn't have quite as many kids and didn't make it this far.
That's true. Yeah. Trying to make that a rationalist cultural meme.
I was going to say,
I
that's
know,
kind of
right?
the culture we're in right now. We're trying to fix it.
Yeah. Remember, was it the Shakers? It was the Shakers that had the opposite meme. No one should have kids. And now there's no more Shakers.
Yeah.
That's a problem in the long term. Yeah. So humans love the taste of sugar and fat, and we love our sons and daughters. We seek social status and sex. We sing and dance and play. We learn for the love of learning. 1,000 delicious tastes matched to ancient reinforcers that once correlated with reproductive fitness. Now sought whether or not they enhance reproduction. Sex with birth control. Chocolate. The music of long-dead Bach on a CD.
What's a CD?
This post is so old, man. I found it striking that he included that last one there, though, which is why I pulled this out, because I guess the point of making music was to get laid a lot, and now that he's dead, it's not helping anybody to listen to his music still, and yet
it's a genetic meme kind of, like, as you've mentioned that, like passing on your memes instead of your genes.
Yes, I have.
I think the Bach thing is there with chocolate and sex with birth control, not because it has anything to do with Bach's fitness. It has to do with the things we enjoy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like
originally,
people, I'm sure 1,000 guitar sales a year are because the guy buying it is like, this will help get me laid. And the remaining 95% of guitar sales are because music is audible chocolate.
Yeah.
And it's a auditory superstimulus, right?
but the idea is that it's auditory chocolate because the people producing music would have more grandchildren.
I don't know about that. That's got to be a part of the recipe, but I think that it's just
Your conscious choice to buy a guitar is usually like divorced from that.
Right,
Like several steps. I mean, like you might be a guitar guy playing Wonderwall in like City Park trying to hit on chicks, but most people aren't. Most people like learn to play an instrument because they enjoy music.
the same reason when I go buy a chocolate bar, I'm not doing it to get laid or to like whatever increase my caloric intake so that I might survive long enough to reproduce. I'm doing it because it tastes good, right?
I think it's a matter of these things being correlated, regardless of whether they're intentional. So like, I mean, just to go there, Eliezer, like the first thing he mentions here is oral sex, basically, and I'm pretty sure that if you're in a situation where you're having oral sex, then you're closer to a situation where you're having procreative sex than if you weren't having oral sex.
Yes.
So like proximally speaking, we haven't evolved to be repulsed by oral sex because it's generally on the pathway to procreative sex. If oral sex were actually something that people just decided to do all the time instead of having procreative sex, then we probably would have evolved to find it repelling.
Huh.
You know?
That's a good point. If it was a substitute as opposed to a complementary good.
Yeah, it's just, I would guess that it tends to be more of a thing that leads to.
That has been my experience.
We don't have to guess. There's various animal species that also do oral sex, and they tend to also be like ones that have familial ties and social, like communal type cultures. Whereas like insects definitely don't. like reptiles don't, you know. Bats do. They live in colonies.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The way I ended this is I pulled out a few things from the final paragraphs. It's not actually quite the way he did it, but
if you want to hear the whole thing, Ineos has recorded it.
Exactly, I have, and it is linked, so you can listen to it. But he more or less ends with saying that this is a good thing. Like, what would we do with the future? What would we do with the billions of galaxies in the night sky? Fill them with maximally efficient replicators? Should our descendants deliberately obsess about maximizing their inclusive genetic fitness, regarding all else only as a means to that end? Being 1,000 shards of desire isn't always fun, but at least it's not boring. When we finally learn about evolution, we think to ourselves, obsess all day about inclusive genetic fitness, where's the fun in that? Because, yeah, fuck that.
That's interesting, kind of, in what that has to say about our concern that creating AGI is going to lead to paperclip maximizers. Because we could just as easily be paperclip maximizers.
Yeah.
But we're not, because we're
probably
complicated.
It's probably a little less likely that it would be just a monomaniacal paperclip maximizer now that we're using reinforcement learning. But it might be doing things like the equivalent of, storing up apples and playing lots of music. And humans aren't needed for that necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, it may have 1,000 shards of desire as well, but if none of them include humans being alive, that still sucks for us.
I feel like it makes me less concerned about a paperclip maximizer or the other failure modes.
It's at least less horrifying than a paperclip maximizer.
Well, I mean, just because, like, we've seen the way that we have our one example of sentient consciousness arising from what was a paperclip maximizer originally. A maximally efficient replicator. And we turned out okay-ish. Like, I don't know, just makes me a little bit less worried that that's sort of like the normal end result of a mind. Even
if humans were wiped out, a universe with baby-eating aliens and super happies is better than a universe with a maximally efficient reproductive thing. Because they seem slightly more human in that they have multiple competing goals and drives and stuff.
It's also kind of, I have complicated feelings about it because I'm having a hard time even articulating this. I guess it's sort of very subjective whether a paperclip maximizer is better or worse than something that makes art. Like, we think that things like us are cool because we're like us.
Yeah.
But, like, it's not like it's morally better somehow or aesthetically better, except for subjectively. But then again, like, that's sort of where you have to just end the philosophical argument, I think.
I think all those things are just subjective, right?
Yeah. I remember, like, when I was, like, a tween, I read, like, I think a New York Times article that was suggesting that we create art because of, inclusive genetic fitness. It's like, art's all about, having sex and reproducing more. And I got really depressed after reading that for a little bit because I wanted to be an artist at the time, and I did in fact get an art degree later. But it's just like, oh man, it's all for nothing, like art and music and
It's not for
It's
nothing.
science.
It's for getting laid.
Yeah, well, I don't know, it's just like, oh, it makes it seem so vulgar and like, you know, you like to think of it as, if it's the same thing as, you know, the unweaving the rainbow.
Yeah.
Understanding how the rainbow works doesn't mean it's not cool anymore. And eventually I kind of was just like, I seem to still enjoy consuming and creating art, regardless of knowing that it had these like deeper roots in trying to get my ancestors laid. So whatever.
Yeah. Do you think that a artificial general intelligence with a coherent utility function would end up being more like a paperclip maximizer than like a human?
I think it wouldn't have a coherent utility function. Like, we already don't understand what the heck GPT-3 is doing.
Right. Is that good?
And like,
Or scary?
what do you mean by coherent anyway? Because it's like, does that mean we can understand it or that it can understand itself? Because we also don't understand ourselves.
In theory, it's not our utility function to want genetic and reproductive success.
I mean, humans aren't legible. That's what we're trying to figure out, so we can like try to figure out how to reverse engineer friendly AI, right?
I don't know. Do we want to
I haven't solved
become
that
that
yet,
legible?
right? Maybe because like this is already like a step in the direction of legibility, and I feel like my reaction once again is to be kind of sad about it at first, like, oh, it's like, you know, it doesn't have a grand meaning or a greater purpose, and it's like, but so what? Like, does that change anything about the experience, or, you know, like make me want to become a nihilist and go like murder a bunch of babies because nothing matters? Nope. So whatever.
Yeah, made you depressed for a while.
I think we're accidentally straying into the topic of today's conversation. Actually,
I don't think it's accidental. I was trying to
because
push us in that direction because I think they are related.
Yeah,